Lieutenant Colonel Richard Michaud, United States Air Force, Korea and Vietnam, and Richard also was in World War II. He went into the Navy in 1945 at the end of World War II and got out of the Navy and then went into the Air Force in 1950. He went to pilot training, wanted to be a pilot. Actually was selected to a Top Gun school also, not like the movie The Real Thing. And that really impressed me right there. I interviewed Richard in Scottsdale, Arizona, April 17th of this year, just a few months ago. I interviewed 8 veterans at that time. You've seen 6 of their stories. This is number 7. I've got one more that I haven't shown. And just a great interview. Got to meet his family, great family. I just love this man, he's a man of God. Just 96 years old, folks. One of the oldest veterans I've interviewed. He would have been 96, 80, about 75, 74, 75 when I started my work in Arizona 21 and a half years ago. But he waited for me, and it was just well worth the story. Well over an hour interview. We sat there and talked, and I listened, and he told me his story. Like I said, he was a fighter pilot during the Korean War and the Vietnam War. He flew F-86Ds. Those are American transonic jet interceptors that were in service during the Korean War. And in Vietnam, he flew the A-1 Skyraider. That was an American single-seat attack aircraft. And he has a little model airplane of the A-1 Skyraider at the end of this interview. I want you to see that. Also notice the shirt that he's wearing during the interview. One of the most impressive shadow boxes of any veteran I've interviewed. You'll see it at the end. It's so well done. 5 distinguished flying crosses, if you can believe that, folks. He's got it right there. A Bronze Star and many, many other medals and commendations. Like I said, he retired as a lieutenant colonel, did so much. 193 combat missions in Vietnam, folks. I love the pictures at the beginning, right after this introduction. You'll see some of these pictures, and beautiful picture of him and his wife, and just a great man. Richard, thank you. I want to just look in this camera and say thank you so much for telling me your story. One of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. And I'm sure I'm leaving something out. He's an accomplished author. I think he's published 5 or 6 books, and just an amazing man. You're gonna love this man. I want to thank Michael and Darlene Sorofsky over in the Denver area, and Trish Kerr Hansen in Desert Hills, and Hansen Desert Hills in Scottsdale, where we did the interviews. But you guys, thank you again. These interviews were so delightful. It was such a wonderful trip down there. Hope to come down again at the beginning of the year and do some more interviews. But you guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you for your dedication to our veterans and this country as we fight for the same freedoms in our own country that our veterans fought for. And thank you for your support of my work. It's greatly appreciated. Folks, I'd like to encourage you to donate to this work, become a part of this work, take ownership in what I'm doing here. Freedom is not free, and there's a price to pay for our freedoms, and the work that I'm doing, I believe, is helping to share this with our younger generation. I'm going to be sharing more information about my school programs in the next few messages. I have a special video I'm putting together for that. We got to take this to our younger generation, folks. That's half of why I'm doing this work, is to share it with our younger generation. And I've done that in the schools. I want to go back into the schools. It's been a number of years since I've gone into the schools, and I just love going into the schools and sharing this work and bringing veterans with me. So if that's of interest in your area, you might know a school principal or a history teacher, you ought to reach out to me, because I'm going to be looking for opportunities to go to some of these areas again this year. But anyways, if you'd like to become a part of my work, you can help donate or sponsor a veteran story. There's information in the video descriptions, comment section of this video, and on my website, larrycapetto.com. You can donate there. And if you'd like to just honor a loved one in your family with a story, with a sponsored story, I encourage you to do that. Just someone in your family that has served, you want to honor them, send me a picture of them, a little bit of information. I'll share it at the introduction of the video like I'm doing now, and you'll be the official sponsor of that story. So, Voices of History Radio, don't want to go without giving a plug for that. It's 24 hours a day. I listen to it all the time. It's so wonderful. I love hearing my veterans. A lot of them are gone now, so their voices live on. And it's just a great supplement to this channel. So Voices of History Radio, you can download the apps for free. Listen to them on the go, wherever you're at. Commuting, driving. I like to share it with truck drivers and kids in schools. The school's starting up now as I record this introduction. We need to get this living history in the palm of their hands, folks. So That's it for now. Thank you. Let's honor Richard Michaud right now with this interview. Share this story. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't. Let's keep this thing going, folks. And I hope you enjoy it. God bless you. Make sure I can hear you. So the first question is the toughest question, okay? But I already know the answer, but for the camera, how old are you? How old are you?
96.
Did you ever think you'd be 96 years old?
Never.
When you look at pictures of yourself, like in front of the airplanes and back in World War II, what do you think when you see?
No, that's not World War II.
No, but when you see pictures of yourself, you were in the Navy in World War II, right?
Yes.
What do you think when you see those old pictures?
I wonder what I'm still doing here. I must have a reason for being here.
Well, you do. I think maybe some of it's today. What do you think? Maybe some of the reason.
You're going to interview 8 more people?
8 this week.
This week?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is my second day here. I live in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Oh.
And I came down here, like I said, 21 years ago. I got in my car. When I saw Saving Private Ryan in 1997, something kind of shook loose in me. I've always had a fascination for World War II. I contacted the editor at the East Valley Tribune newspaper. You probably get that paper. And he referred me to a columnist, Gary Nelson. This is 21 years ago. And he wrote a story that said, filmmaker looking for D-Day vets. And that kind of gave me my focus because I wanted to do something with World War II. And so I came down here in 2003 in February twice and in March, and I interviewed probably 50 or 60 veterans. A lot of them were snowbirds in the area. Mm-hmm. But that started my work, and I did 2 films on D-Day, and then I switched to Iwo Jima and did 2 films on the Battle of Iwo Jima. I've been to France 3 times. I've been to Iwo Jima once. Mm-hmm. And then I started meeting Korea veterans through all of this, and then Vietnam veterans, and eventually did a film on the Korean War and the Vietnam War. So I call it an incredible journey I've been on for 21 years.
Unbelievable.
And the history of what I'm recording is priceless. Our kids today aren't receiving this in the school books. And so teachers tell me that history is best learned from those that were there. And so the story has to come from the source. So in my documentaries, there's no narration. It comes from the veterans themselves. And then I put them together. So I don't have the luxury of entertaining people, but I provide a true story for them. So we're going to listen to your story today. Tell me about how old you were when you went into the military.
2 days after I graduated from high school.
So
I went into the Navy.
What year was that?
That was 45.
So why did you enlisted?
Well, before the end of the war, and before I went in, I was in the Navy Reserve. I'd gone down and, joined that far. So as soon as I graduated, they put me on a train and took me to San Diego.
For your basic training?
Basic,
So 2 days after high school, you knew what you wanted to do?
yeah.
What,
Well, I knew what we had to do. That was part of the sign-up, is that as soon as I was out of high school, I went into the service. And I think that was pretty typical.
what month was that?
That would have been May.
Okay. So you got in at the end of the war then?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you go overseas? Did you go overseas?
Yes, rather interesting. When the war ended, all of the official people in San Diego decided a few days ahead that they couldn't handle all of the GIs turned loose on the town. And so they had A Company and B Company. And A Company went out on liberty on the first night and then whatever. And the spirit kind of told me, don't go into town. you can only get into trouble if you go into town. So I volunteered to be charge quarters. So I checked everybody out, and then I checked everybody, what was left of them, in after the night on the town. And I did that the 2 nights. So I didn't really get in on the big celebrating, which I was happy not to do.
So the war with Europe ended in, what was it, May of 1945? Is that when, was that what we call VE Day?
Yeah. I actually, after boot camp, I actually went into training to operate a landing craft. And there was landing craft for personnel, which was LCVP, and then LCMs for military. So that's what I spent most of my time after boot camp. And I learned how to land actually a seagoing vessel, small going seagull vessel, that I was supposed to take into Japan.
Let me turn this light on a second.
You did go over to the Philippines.
So you mentioned the LCVP. That was one of my fascinations when I started my work. The boats that Andrew Jackson Higgins from Louisiana built for the military that took the troops into D-Day and Normandy and even, I think, Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
But they carried about 30 or 35 people. They had a coxswain and a boatsman.
It just had one engine, diesel.
A gray marine diesel engine?
Yeah.
And you were trained on that?
Yeah, I was. There's a trick to it. If you get too far ahead of the little wave going on to shore, you're beached, and then you're stuck. You can't go back for any more. So that's what we learned. 6 weeks is to just ride that wave behind it.
So that was for amphibious assaults? Is that useful?
Yeah.
And so what was your job in the Navy?
Well, it was supposedly to learn to transport, a certain amount of people and mechanized stuff, to the shore, from the boat to the shore. And then when the war ended, everything was obviously, what do we do with everybody now?
Right.
And so I still had orders to go to the Philippines, which is where a lot of the leap off from there to Japan was going to be made. And I served, because they had stocked so much gear and so forth in preparation for the invasion of Japan. These were supply dumps all over the Philippine Islands. And so I was assigned to be a guard on those. And that was day and night, because if you left them alone, they just disappeared. And so I did that for a few months, and then there was a group of us guys that had come over from America to the Philippines, and I was plucked out of that and sent down to the Admiralty Islands. And I was down there on a floating dry dock, and it was a fascinating device. They had about 9 boat shells, and then they had wing walls on them. And they had about 9 of those lined up, and they would fill them with water and sink them, and the wounded, so to speak, the damaged ship would come in on those wing walls, and then they'd blow the tanks and come up underneath it, and then they had it was up, they could repair it. And so our job at that time was to actually take those apart. We'd flop the wing walls and then separate it from the other shells, the boat shells, and then they would tow them off and wherever they were to do with them.
So you're like 18 years old here, right? About 18?
Yeah.
And
Very green 18-year-old.
Where were you when the atomic bombs were dropped, and how did you hear that news?
I was in the training of the LCVP and the LCM when the bomb was dropped.
What kind of news was that to you guys? Was it like, hooray, or was it like, oh no? Or how did you react to that?
I'm sure that most of them, like I did, thank goodness.
Because you probably would have gone over there to Japan.
Well, if you're in a landing craft, there's only one place you're going to go, and that's Japan. And of course, before the bomb, that would have been a hell house of wounded and killed people in that invasion.
Well, some of my veterans, some of my World War II veterans were preparing for the invasion of Japan. Even those that served in Europe were going to Japan.
Yeah.
Were you preparing for an invasion of Japan?
That's exactly what I was prepared for. And I was to operate a landing craft that ran from the big ship that brought them from America, and load them up, and then take them in, and supposedly was to land them in Japan. And that was both people and commodities.
So what do you think you would have been doing if we would have invaded Japan? You've been offshore on an LST probably, loading troops into the LCVPs, or would you have been on an LCVP?
I had no idea what was the next move for me. I mean, my main effort was to load it and unload it on the shore. After the war, as I say, I went to the Admiralty Islands and worked on those repairs. And then I got enough they add up your points. Mm-hmm. I finally got enough points, and I just got shipped home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that 45 or 46?
It was a pretty quiet effort, really, for me.
So how long were you in the military in World War II? A couple of years?
No, I stayed a year.
Okay.
and got 3 years of GI Bill from that, and went back to Utah State, which was home, and went to school.
So where were you born?
Born in Minneapolis.
How did you get to Utah?
Mother divorced and remarried, and they decided we were members of the LDS church, and she decided she'd move out to Utah so that we could be more active.
So what'd you do after World War II? Did you go to work? Go to school?
Went to school, met my wife, got married, graduated in a journalism, interesting
Me too.
journalism major.
I'm a journalism major from school also. Yeah.
And we got out and didn't really know, what I was going to do. And one day I was driving a truck, which was the thing I had been doing before I went into the service. And they asked, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm driving a truck." "Well, here you're a distinguished military student and you're driving a truck." And I said, "Well, that's the easiest thing to do, that I don't know what to do next." "Well, why don't you join in there and get in the Air Force?" So I went home with a couple of handouts from them, and we were living with my wife's folks at the time. We showed them that, and I'm sure that they were glad to see us move up and move out. And so we decided to go in the Air Force, which we did in a non-flying capacity, and was in, and it was a great assignment. I was assigned to a B-50 outfit as an intelligence officer. And so after a while we decided, well, if you're going to stay in the Air Force, you ought to be a pilot. But I couldn't pass the test because I couldn't tell the difference between the red and the green. And I still can't. But I asked for some heavenly help to pass the test, and I got it, and I passed the test. And so I went in the military and went into pilot training. And that was in Kinston, North Carolina. And interesting enough, you've seen probably a lot of advertisements. Were you stationed at Camp Lejeune? Well, my brother was stationed at Camp Lejeune. And I can't get in touch with his wife to find out whether she, got involved, because he obviously had problems. He was a Marine. So when I was through with pilot training, I was selected for the Air Force's Top Gun school. And that was about the top 5%, top 1%. The Air Force's Top Gun school was much like the movie, except we didn't have all the girls. And since it was given at Nellis, there were a lot of women available. And some of my single guys, took advantage of that. But so I was selected for Top Gun and went to Top Gun school. And probably the interesting thing there is that we were still going to Top Gun when the Korean War ended. And we had instructors who had 2 or 3 or 4 MiGs to their credit. And so one day we were up, and we were supposed to go up and dogfight, and the other 4 planes that were supposed to fight against aborted. So we had a pretty adventuresome instructor, and he put us in trail and put us down over Lake Mead at about 50 feet and into the mouth of the Grand Canyon. And we stayed with that, until it got pretty steep, and then we got out of it. But that was the most exciting flight that I had in Top Gun, was into the mouth of the Grand Canyon.
Well, I got to tell you, what you're describing here, I'm thinking of all kinds of things. What year did you go into the Air Force? This was after World War II. What year was that you went into the Air Force? Late 40s? Or was it in the 50s?
50.
What was the interest for flying? You came out of the Navy, now why are you interested in flying?
I think it was probably because I'd always liked to fly, and basically, I was when I first went into college, I wasn't in the journalism major. I was in wildlife management, and so you do a lot of counting and so forth with herds of animals, and so you do that from flying. And so I really had a very basic pilot's license when I went into the Air Force. And so when I decided that that's where I wanted to go and why I wanted to go, it was not a big change for me.
Why were you selected for Top Gun school? I'm not sure I understand that. Because of your testing or your flying abilities? Why were you selected for that? That's pretty amazing.
I think it was
Was you're good looking? No.
a mixture of good flying, but also of anticipation and being able to get ahead of the other guy. That's really what you were doing, is trying to make a movement that would put him on, and you're on his tail. And that was both the person and the airplane. And we had some airplanes that were equal to their Top Gun top airplane, which was the Zero. And so that's what we were looking for, is someone that, was aggressive and could look ahead and could make the moves and so forth to beat the other guy.
That's pretty cool. Can I say? I mean, when people think of Top Gun, of course, they think of Tom Cruise in the movie and all that.
Yeah.
But that's Hollywood, which I don't think is a good depiction of anything. But what aircraft, that picture over there, what aircraft is that? Is that during his Korea service?
That's the Skyraider, A-1 Skyraider. And it was in two shapes, really. In the bombing, the flying, the bomber type, it was in this shape. And then to be a fighter, they trimmed it down and made a Corsair out of it. And so it was in the end of the World War. The fighter model, fighter one, had come out first because they were needing them in Southeast Asia. And so the Corsairs came out and they made a name for themselves. And then interestingly, the A-1, when I was involved with it, was involved with an image. Did you ever see the Bridges of Tokari movie? Mm-hmm. Okay. And they were trying to bomb some railroad bridges, right? In your estimation, which airplane, jet or prop, knocked those bridges down?
Jet.
Jet. You know what really did? Prop, the A-1. Hmm. And that's still carried, that's an image thing. And I still ran into it just this last year. They interviewed me for the Luke Air Force Base airport, or newspaper ad.
Okay.
And when they sent me well, they came to my home and they saw these things, and they knew I flew the Skyraider and so forth. When they sent me the article as my copy and so forth, it was the A-1 that was doing all the damage, and it was really A-1s that did it, but they were saying it was F-4s. So poor old A-1 never got its credit in 2 different wars.
Did you ever get in any combat during the Korean War?
No, I was still in Top Gun training.
And the war ended in '53, so
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What happened after that in your training? And
my first assignment was the forming of a squadron. And it was close to San Francisco Bay. And by the way, what most pilots have done is fly under the Golden Gate Bridge. But I'm above that because I had gone up the canyon. But most everybody has flown under the Golden Gate Bridge. So anyway, we were training into F-86Ds, and that was an all-weather aircraft. And we took those we formed the squadron and took it to Landstuhl, Germany. So I flew for 3 years over in Germany in the 86s.
I don't know at that time, what squadron or bomb group or wing were you with during all this time?
It was an all-weather squadron, and we were ultimately named the outstanding all-weather squadron in the Air Force.
But was there a number designation like the 338th or the?
Yeah.
Remember? It's okay if you don't remember that.
326th Fighter Interceptor Squadron.
326, okay. Mm-hmm. So how many years did you fly these jets, and do you still fly them? I wish, huh?
I came back from Germany and went to ROTC at the University of Utah.
Okay.
And so I was there for 3 years. Then I was taken in a non-accompanied capacity to Alaska. And I was trained I went first to training in the radar. And so we were the guys up there that started Santa Claus on his trip. Yeah. And we were on the dew line. And first 6 months were pretty dull, except it was 35 and 40 below. I can remember going out in the snowdrift, and it was cold. I thought I put a minus 35, and the next week it went down to a minus 62. So you couldn't keep up with it. But the second half, I was assigned as the ops officer to the Alaskan Fish Camp. And so anybody assigned to Alaskan Air Command in there could jump on a weekly C-47 that went around and picked up people and dropped people off. And they could jump on that and come to our base, and we'd put them up and furnish them with fishing gear and so forth. And they could fish just, all they wanted to. I was there for about 6 months, and when I left to go home to my new assignment, I took 135 silver salmon that I'd frozen with me. And so I took them down to the, what do they call that? The cannery. Took them down to the cannery in Alaska. And I walked in, with a whole truckload, They said, how many you got? I had 35. Blah, 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 blah. So they picked up a box of little cans of, like you see of fish cans, and handed me, and that was my trade. So we ate salmon for years after that.
Richard, how fast did these jets fly?
How fast?
Yes.
Well, we got us initially in the F-86D, which it was then the fastest bird in the Air Force because it had an afterburner, and you were really smoking with it, but you still weren't going through it like they do today. And so in order for us to go through the speed of sound, we'd have to do it this way. And when we did, then North American would give you a little Air Force pin with the fact that you had flown faster than the speed of sound.
So how fast was that? Miles per hour?
That's a good question. I'm guessing it's about 1,100.
That's pretty fast.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah.
And considering now that they do it, you know, straight and level, and they have this leading speed of sound, that bubble that goes ahead of them.
How high would you go?
I I remember once in Germany, I was supposed to take a bird up and check something out on it. And I'd flown in Germany, and I pretty well thought I'd do it. And I never checked with the weatherman before I took off. Took off and just pulled it up and climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed. And I had my stuff up on the instrument panel, and it started to float off and come back. And I was just about ready to keel over when my nose poked above the clouds. And that was completely wrong to everything I've flown in Germany. In Germany, normally, you know, you go into it at about 3,000 and you pop off at about 5. But for some reason or other, I'm up to about 35,000, and I haven't straightened out and leveled out. Well, when I finally got my nose above the clouds, I then peeled off and got my speed up, you know, and then leveled out straight, and finally then climbed up slow, and finally was able to come up and see the sun again. But sometimes you do some dumb things.
What you're describing, most people have no idea. I mean, you know, flying on a commercial plane is nothing like what you were doing.
Yeah.
When's the last time you flew an airplane or a jet? Do you remember?
Last time I flew a jet,
A long time ago?
a long time ago. Mm-hmm. See, this isn't counted as a jet, but this is, you know, where I flew in combat, and that I really appreciated a good airplane.
So
A jet was the F-86D, which was in Germany.
Okay.
Right now, we had the Ramstein, which was the 12th Air Force headquarters, was there at Landstuhl, and then the runway for it was Landstuhl Air Force Base. And so it had a small, when we were there, it had a small detachment for medical. Well, then you see what was the MASH unit? Yeah, you have MASH. That was yeah. And now everything, and in the last 10 years or more, everything that had problems medical in the Near East, all the Iran and the whatever, came to Landstuhl. And they either bound you up and put you in a working order again, or they sent you back to the States. But I think everything flew from the Near East into Landstuhl.
Well, what we're doing, we're traveling through time with you. You know, you're my eyes and ears to this doorway in the past. And
When I was there at Landstuhl, my wife and I camped with a 2-man mountain tent. And we traveled down through Austria, down to Italy, Rome, on one trip. And then we went over to England and Scotland on a second trip. And we pretty well saw most of Europe. Loved the German people, and loved, they were, you know, how Hitler ever talked them into what they did.
he conditioned and brainwashed them through propaganda.
Yeah, it was unbelievable because they were good, downhearted, hardworking people.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Ein bisschen.
Very
Do
good.
you speak German?
I took German in high school, so I can do a little bit, but
Yeah.
you know, wie heißen Sie?
Yeah.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Are you familiar with the LDS Church?
Yes.
My stake president went on a mission to northern Germany. So every time I see him, I see, wie geht's? He right back, sehr gut. Yeah.
Tell me about your involvement in Vietnam. Were you flying in Vietnam?
Yeah, I had.
Did you go right from the 50s into the 60s? You're still in the military, or did you get out again and go back in?
I stayed in.
Okay.
And spent 3 years there at the University of Utah, and then I also went back into it and spent 3 years at Arizona State. And from there, I was working on a PhD, and interesting, we still don't know why today, but I had everything completed but the dissertation, and one day my committee chairman woke up and he was blind. And so I've never finished my PhD. But I spent, as I say, then I ended up going when I was working in that PhD program, I ended up doing a term, so to speak, in the financial aids. They required you to do some, you know, that little side learning, whatever you went into. So I ended up spending a number of years in ROTC, and I was the president of the Arizona financial aids administrators, and also the Utah one.
So again, Vietnam, you were in Vietnam.
Yeah.
In what capacity? Did you go in country?
When I came out of the university, whatever, and got my assignment to Vietnam, I got the assignment to go to search and rescue with the A-1 straight out of there. So I went from there, from where I flew here in the Mesa area, and went directly to Florida for checking out of the A-1. And from there, of course, I went to jungle training and went to some other training before I went for a year's flying in Vietnam.
So tell me about that year and where you were stationed, and you're flying the A-1 over there?
Yes.
Skyraider?
Yeah.
And you're saying that's not a jet?
It's not.
Okay.
It's got the best and most powerful propeller that the Air Force had.
So where were you stationed at in Vietnam, and tell me about some of the missions
Well, I
you
went
flew.
into NKP, Knock On Phanah, and went in as I was lieutenant colonel by that time, so I went as a ops officer in the first squadron, and then from there I took over the 602nd as commander, and then I went for about 5 months as assistant director for operations at Wing. And so I had 3 assignments primarily.
So you were a commander of unit. You weren't. Did you fly any combat missions?
I flew 193.
Wow, in Vietnam?
Yes.
Were they eventful? I mean, tell me about some of that.
About this time, Barbara pipes up and says, and he never took a bullet.
5 distinguished flying crosses. How does somebody get that?
Uniquely, I think we were flying in a very combat role because at the time we just came up with that figure. We had 78 guys on the ground. We got 76 of them out. And in order to get those out, you had to fight to get them out. And so that's where our role of the search, to find them, to isolate them, to sanitize the bad guys, and then the Jolly Greens could come in. The Jolly Greens, when they hit the hover, to lower the jungle penetrator, they were an easy target at that time. And so we had to really put the kibosh to all of the bad guys in the area before we brought the Jolly in for the pickup.
Who were you rescuing?
Army people, Air Force, jets, pilots, been shot down. So I say we had 78 guys on the ground. Mm-hmm. We got 76 of them out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What kind of weapons are on a A-1? What are you firing?
Well, you've got 4 20 millimeters in the wings, and 20 millimeters exploded when they hit their target. We often carried a 50 millimeter gun under the wing. We carried a lot of CBUs, which were bomblets about that big. You'd drop into the string, and when they hit the ground, they'd explode. We had a white phosphorus, it was a big bomb. As a matter of fact, the A-1 could carry everything. It was set up that it could actually carry an atomic bomb. But there were probably 30 variations that the A-1 has, depending on what it's carrying, what it's supposed to do. But it was just a powerful engine, and that made the difference. I have a model at home of the first airplane that flew the British Channel. Mm. And I think it was 14 horses worth. And it was all engine power.
What was the toughest mission you went on? Do you remember? Is it,
I'm sorry?
the toughest mission that you flew, the hardest mission? Or did it become
Well,
routine?
I guess some of the hardest ones were some of the best ones. Let's say I have 5 DFCs. The last DFC was one I was the Sandy one, which meant that I was in charge of the pickup, and that was a picture perfect one because we went in, I'm thinking either doused or killed. Either way, we contaminated all of the bad guys in the area. To do that, when you're first making a pickup, you have to know which tree that your survivor is hiding under, because you drop ordnance on everything else to keep everything else away from them. And they're pretty smart. They know when someone goes down that there's a lot of traffic's going to come in an effort to recover them, and that means that they're available to be shot down. Okay. One of the highest and most extensive search and recovery we had was on a guy called 22 Boxer, and it was an F-4. There was a front seat, back seat, and the front seat had already been found and killed, and this guy was the back seat, and he'd hid himself under some roots from a tree in the river, and that's where he would hide out a place so they couldn't find him. But we had to try 11 times to pick him up before we finally got him on the 11th time. And that was because every time the Jelly Green would come in, he'd get hosed. And so to protect him, he'd get out of there. Then we'd have to sanitize it some more. And then we'd bring him in again.
So when you say sanitize, what do you mean by that?
Suppress all the bad guys.
Kill them?
And you're talking either guys with a rifle or a machine gun, or you're talking about a big war that's in a cave, close by.
Did you see them on the ground when you're shooting at them?
Yeah, the only time that ever happened was on one of my DFCs when I was up just burning fuel. I was on Sandy, which is search and rescue, and I was just burning fuel to land. And I got a call from King, which is the overall controller jet that's above the area, and King heard from one of their ground troops radios that the North Vietnamese were invading it, the town, and they were hollering for help. And so they sent me over, and from a distance I could see that the town was here, and then there was a bare spot about as big as a football field, and then the North Vietnamese over here were moving across it. So I came in and I had the 4 20 Mike Mikes in the wings, the 20 millimeters, and then I had a lot of the CPUs we dropped, and I emptied my load, chased them back up. This is a good time for you to invade South Vietnam. And so when the whole thing was over and I came back over the town and wiggled my wings, everybody was out, the good guys out in the big spread, and they were all waving. And it was the most emotional one, I suppose, that I flew on.
So when you're in the cockpit, when you fire those machine guns, I've got a remote here, are you pushing something and do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do?
Yeah.
What is, this sounds kind of silly, but what does that feel like when you do that?
Well, you're firing 4 at the same time, 2 on each wing, and it's not as much as chunk 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 chunk, because they're bigger. Well, 20 millimeter.
Yeah, 20.
Yeah. So they're more, instead of, which is a smaller caliber. But when they hit, they explode. So they were pretty powerful.
So after these combat missions, was there a debriefing time where you'd have a debriefing or whatever you call it?
Yeah.
And do you talk about the kills or the whatever, or do you just pat each other on the back?
There is some of that done. You're normally, in this North Vietnamese war, you're talking about truck kills. In fact, there's a cute story for reciprocating people to talk about. There's a report from talking to some of the captured North Korean truck drivers. And they said, oh yeah, he says, when we hear a reciprocating engine, when we hear prop, we drive into the thickest part of the jungle and get under it. If we hear a jet, we drive out and park out on the trail where they can see us and hide under it, because we know the jets can't hit us. They're poor marksmen. So the reciprocating guys like to tell that story on the jets.
Did you fly in formations? Did you have a flight lead, or did you fly by yourself?
Yeah, when the guy was on his last mission, he normally would fly in a formation of 4. Make a pass on the runway.
I'm sure you've seen the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds fly.
Yeah.
So when you see that, are you thinking back about when you were flying, and can you understand the maneuvers they're doing and the speed?
They're tremendous pilots to fly that. I give them every credit that they, deserve.
I bet they would shake your hand.
If they did get a chance to do something, they probably would. Yeah.
Do you miss flying like that? I mean, do you miss those days?
Yeah, in fact, one of my grandsons came down from Alaska. He didn't bring his airplane down, but he's a pilot. He has an airplane he flies around Alaska. And he came down and felt it was really a thrill for me to get up and fly again. Well, it was a thrill for me to be up with him, but to fly a little puddle jumper nowadays, there's no excitement at all, because everything I flew, practically, if you're flying low, you want to see what's below you. You just roll it over and look at it. You can't do that with a flivver. So I've had some great times. I'm a command pilot, which is the highest you can go.
In the Navy, what was your rank? A petty officer? Do you remember what your rank was?
I was a seaman no class.
No class? So you're a seaman.
I was a first class, but I was about as low as you can go.
And so in the Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel, you retired.
Yeah.
Is that like one step from a general, kind of like? I mean, could you have been promoted to general?
Lieutenant Colonel is a rank that most commanders start to get some degree of authority My brother, older brother, was a Marine, and he was a full colonel. But he spent a handful of times at the Pentagon, and everybody who goes to the Pentagon, if you don't come out a colonel, you know, you're not very good at fixing things for yourself. So it's unusual. There were only 2 kids in my family. We were both in the service.
Well, I'm just amazed sitting here talking to you and looking at the medals and just trying to get a little bit of an idea of what you went through. But I don't see many World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veterans, so that's an amazing thing itself. Are you still sought after in the military world? Do people knock on your door and want an autograph, or, I mean...
We haven't seen any of them, have we? No.
Well,
Although
he's the Veterans Day Parade.
Mesa has a good parade every year, and somehow at one time we were the highest ranking Air Force, and so I was given a chance to ride in a Model T, and along with the other, they had a Air Force Marshal and an Army and a Navy and a Coast Guard and so forth. And so once we made that hookup with this Model T guy, we've continued to ride in that every year since. So we have a great relationship with him, and we ride in the Model T section. Barbara made a great sign that's on the side. We didn't bring it, did we? Yeah. Saying World War II and Korean War and Vietnam War and so forth. So we have a fun time riding, and that all. Well, Clay hasn't ridden with us, have you?
No.
Oh, but the ladies have enjoyed riding with me.
Have you done any stories with the East Valley Tribune paper?
Just with the the one that the folks from Luke came out, and they published that in a Air Force, what? You could anybody can pick it up. You know, it's a resource for them.
I'm going to digress from combat. I ask this question with all my veterans, but being a veteran of this country, a World War II, Korea, and Vietnam vet, Richard, what does the American flag mean and represent to you?
Well, you can tell it means a lot. And I think, you know, when I flew out of NKP, we flew in nights, days, bad weather or whatever it was. So when we came back, and we saw the flag flying, it was the most important sight, you know, that we could have wanted at the time. So I loved the Stars and Stripes. As a matter of fact, I was telling the kids that if America ever needs some real devoted and worthwhile people, of course, obviously, I have to go and think about the church in our case. The second ones are radio fans. Before every rodeo, they have a demonstration of the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner. The flag means a lot to me, and I don't know how the whole unravel is going to happen, but it sure is on on its way. But that was the one thing I looked for when I was ending a flight, was to find that flag and see that it was still there.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. What does freedom mean to you? And tell me about the price for freedom.
Well, I think America has been fortunate during its time that freedom was something that they were willing to lay down their lives for if they had to. But a freedom is to live, in my mind, is to live as God, gave the world to live. And we were certainly highly blessed to have that kind of freedom as long as we've had America. But it's on the close edge right now. And we're going to be lucky if we can keep it.
Wow, that's powerful. What would you tell a young person today about the price for freedom? They're born in a free country. They don't know what freedom really is. We take it for granted. What would you tell a young person about the price for freedom?
Well, you need to read your history more and realize, what people went through in order to give you this freedom, this choice of your good and bad was given us through the lives of people, clear back to the formation of our country.
You kind of alluded to it, but expound a bit. Do you feel like we're losing our freedoms today?
I think if you look at the news, where you've seen today was the crowded bridges, I think it was, that the high school, college kids out there saying, Hamas is where it's at. They don't have any idea what they're saying and what, where their feelings are. I get a magazine from the Friends of Zion, an acquaintance who runs, I'd call it a halfway house in Jerusalem for the Jews. And you can get some pretty straight stuff from it. The one before this last one I got had dates of attacks by the Arabs, Hamas, and the whole room that went back for 40, 50 years. And it hasn't changed. As long as they are allowed to ply their trade, they're going to be doing it with the belief that, I'm trying to remember whether we're the big bad guy or the little one. There's two of us. I think we're the big bad guy to them. Mm-hmm. And they've got 9/11, they've got, he had them back every 2 or 3 years for 60 years. They haven't changed. And that's what they're going to continue to do, is to blow up somebody and think that they're doing it for their cause. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And until you change their mind one way or the other, we're going to have to put up with them.
Are you proud to be a veteran of our country?
I feel lucky that I had a chance to be in the services of this country.
Do people thank you?
Pretty good, yeah. The hat is pretty attractive. If I go to Costco, I get a lot of people,
That's
or
good.
Yeah, Costco's probably Costco, Walmart.
Go.
That's good. People come up to you and
Yeah.
shake your hand and thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Since I started my work, I do that all the time. When I go to an airport, through an airport, wherever I'm at, I feel compelled to go up and thank people. And even today, that are serving today, obviously, but wow, your story is amazing. I want,
He hasn't told one story.
yeah, I want to say,
It has to do with that bullet.
okay, well, tell him, have him tell me the story.
You haven't, maybe hold it.
Yeah, go get it. Watch the cord there.
yeah. Barbara knows my stories about as well as
Well, I was going to ask her to, she's
She-
going to give you this. You call that a,
You know, all of the stories, get told, and at the end she says, and he never took a bullet.
Tell your story. And how many were shot at you?
Well, when we weren't involved in a search and rescue, we were trying to stop the trucks on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And you stop a truck by blowing it up, unfortunately. And so we flew day and night working on the trucks. And at night when we were working on them, it was not uncommon these are in a clip of 11. And so it was not uncommon to see 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'd come up and burst at my altitude. They knew I was flying about 10,000 feet.
okay.
And they would send a clip up, and I'd see 1, 2, 3, 4 on one side, and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 on the other side. And I knew I had an A-1 gunner. But it was not unusual to have 6, 8 guns working on you at night at the same time. They all had a tracer on them, so you could see them coming up. And if you ever saw a wing where these had hit, you see a hole about this big. And you're lucky if you don't get shot down. So I've had a few million of these things shot at me.
But was that on your airplane? On your,
No, these
That's
are ground
okay.
enemy
Okay.
firing at me.
Okay.
But they know that I'm flying at about 10,000 feet. And they can hear me, so they know about where to shoot. But as I say, they come up in a series of 7. So when he squeezes the trigger, he starts rolling the thing, so they go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 4.
So this is the anti-aircraft flak or whatever that's being shot at you from the ground?
Yeah.
How did you get that?
I traded these. I have a rifle with a bayonet at home. I traded it. It was black market.
Okay.
But I figured that was nice to have. Since I'd been shot at so often, I ought to have a sample of it.
So you never got hit? Your planes never got hit?
Most of my DFC flights were with someone who took bullets,
Okay.
but I didn't take any.
Wow. So, one more question I want to ask you about your service. How did your faith play a role in all of the military service you were in?
Well, I think first, it gives you a faith of the fact that Jesus Christ really lives. And he really, with his spirit, protects us. And so he has a great interest in us. But there's another guy up there that has an interest in us too. He's the guy with the fork tail. So it's a choice that you have to make, but the Lord really, helps and encourages you and rewards you and makes it worth it, as far as I'm concerned.
Are you LDS?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the patriarchal blessing?
I had a patriarchal blessing.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, I don't mean to badmouth it, because most people, say very thankful things. But I was advised in my patriarchal blessing, if I ever had a question or had a need to counsel with my mother. But my mother was a very distant and almost unconcerned person, and so that was something I kind of miss, and it was a miss. The fact that I was a member of the church has been the blessed thing, and to marry these kids' mother, I was awful lucky.
Yeah. What do you want your family to remember about you someday when you're gone?
I'd almost have to ask Barb.
No, I'm asking you.
Well, one of the things that isn't quite, in the military, one of the reasons I think that I never took a bullet, either in my body or the body of my aircraft, was that I had a lot of temple work that I needed to do for my family. And so, since I've been out of the military, and I've bounced around, that has made things a little bit harder. But we've done over 100,000 names in the temple. And we feel fortunate to be able to do that.
I'm going to ask you to do one more thing, and then I want your kids to help with the shadow box and bring all those to you, because I'm going to,
Okay.
I'll zoom the camera out, but I want you to talk about that. But if you've seen one of my films, at the end of my films, I always ask the veteran to look into the camera and give a salute. When I ask you, can you do that? Give me just a second here. I'm going to set the camera.
That's the only thing that President Biden does well, is he salutes.
Oh my gosh, I didn't think he did anything.
Watch
well.
him the next time. It's a good, crisp salute.
Okay, I'll have to watch that.
Yeah.
I guess I need to find something good about him, right?
But that's about the only good thing I can say of it.
Well, we could let the camera roll some more about that. Because that's, okay. When you're ready, I want you to look into the camera, and I want you to give a salute. If you want to say something, that's fine. If not, just...
God bless you.
That's a good salute. You did good, yeah.
The most interesting, these is Navy and Air Force together, but the most interesting one here is this little footprint right there. When you're Sandy 1 and you run a successful pickup of someone in a search and rescue capacity, the Jolly Greens give you this little footprint.
Okay.
So that's a memorable one that's on there.
Your pictures?
Sandy 1 was our call site for the
Okay.
search and rescue.
Okay. I see a Bronze Star up there. When did you receive a Bronze Star?
This one,
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a Broad Star or not.
it looks like it.
Yeah, this is the DFCs with all of the additional ones. Here I'm getting 2 DFCs at the same time. This is the 86D I flew.
86D. I don't know if I've heard of that.
That was an all-weather. You see the antenna up here, the black nose.
Okay.
Where you got your wings?
This was the day I got my wings.
Okay.
That good-looking girl is my wife.
How can I get? I don't think you sent me. See, one of your homework assignments is, can you scan some of these pictures? I don't know if you can get them out of there. You can't.
We have them all.
Okay. Can somebody take the time to do that and scan them at high resolution and email them to me? Please, please. Okay. Continue. I just am blown away by that. That's one of the most impressive shadow bombs. Who put that together for you? Did they really?
Well, luckily most of them we've got a name below them.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And over here on your left, that distinguished flying cross is in there too.
Now this is the A-1 in the combat mode, and a picture with it. And then this is the DFC, and I've got DFC +4.
That's pretty cool.
Indicating,
Or Navy.
yeah, I'm associating now with other people who have had and gotten the DFCs,
Okay.
but no one's gotten 5 of them like I have.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Bring that model over here and show me. Have them hold that model for a second. I want to have them talk about that. So that's not a typical toy model, right? I mean, that's something you flew, right?
Well, that's a really nice picture of it.
Is that the A1?
That's an A1, but the A1 itself had about 40 or 50 configurations. I mean, it was configured that it could actually drop the bomb.
Okay.
But here it's got this is the fuel tank. This is the bomb with an extender, so that the extender hits the ground and blows it off, and so the impact is all above the ground. Without the extender, the bomb kind of buries itself and blows up.
Okay.
So that's why we were looking for against people, so we wanted that to go off above the ground. But this is a single pilot, but they had what we called a fat face, which was a wider one where you had a left seater or right seater.
Okay.
And then you had a crew section in back that could haul about 10 people. So it was, you name it, it could do it.
That's very cool.
The primary reason it could do it is because it had the most powerful inline engine,
Okay.
the Air Force had.
2,800 horsepower.
2,800. Okay. Wow. That's great.
But that's, when it first came out, it was for the Navy, and so they were painted blue.
Okay.
So in the Korean War, if you talked about airplanes, they'd say send the blue ones.
Ah.
They didn't say send the A-1s, they send the blue ones. And then they decommissioned them and gave them to the South Vietnamese. And General Key, who was the president and actually flew with a good friend of mine, had his special airplane, because they could load these things up and go out and just, really wipe the guys. And then they would come back and just sit in the airplane, and they'd be uploaded with another set of loads. They'd take them out. So they'd do that about 4 times in an afternoon.
Okay.
So they loved the airplane. And Key flew it and had his own personal airplane.
Okay. I'm just going to shake your hand on camera, Richard, and say thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for telling me your story. I'll be a good steward of your story. And
It was my pleasure, my honor.
And your story will live on long after me and you. And that's why I'm doing this.
I think it's a great service that you're providing.
Well, I'm doing this for our younger generation because they're not learning this in schools anymore.
No.
And we've talked about our freedoms, how we're losing our freedoms, and there's people in our country trying to erase history.
Yeah.
And I'm their counterpart. I don't allow that. So these stories will go on for years and years and years.